Welcome to Talking Beats with Daniel Lalchuk. That's me, and I'm so glad you're here. If you like what we do, I'd love it if you gave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And if you're so compelled, write a review. That really helps, and maybe tell a friend or family member. They might like the show as much as you do. If you want to get involved in the program, visit our website, talkingbeats.com, and click Support the Show, where you can make either a one-time or a recurring donation. As we look to continue having cliche-free conversations of real substance with a diverse range of the world's most compelling people, your support is so appreciated, especially as we look to expand and increase our offerings. If you have a question, comment, or thought, find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or if you wish to reach out directly, email me at daniel@talkingbeats.com. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get on with today's conversation. On today's program, nature writer Mary Roach. She's the author of beloved books such as Grunt, The Curious Science of Humans at War, Spook, Science Tackles the Afterlife, and Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. She's just now out with a new book, Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law. What's to be done about a jaywalking moose, a grizzly bear caught breaking and entering, a murderous tree? The answers, as Mary Roach discovers, are best found not in jurisprudence but in science, the curious science of human-wildlife conflict, a discipline at the crossroads of human behavior and wildlife biology. Mary Roach, with whom, as you will hear, I have certain things in common, brings a humor and a lightness to some very serious subjects. She joins me right now. I couldn't be more thrilled. Welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And Mary Roach, I'm holding the book here in my left hand called Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law. Nature doesn't mean to break the law, but how does nature break the law, and why the hell should we care?
Well, these are laws that we wrote for people. Like thou shalt not, well, that's biblical, never mind. You shouldn't kill people or steal from people, or jaywalking is illegal, littering, trespassing. And animals do all these things. They're not committing crimes. They happen to be breaking our laws, but they're not committing crimes. They're just animals being animals and trying to find something to eat, trying to find a place to build a nest that's warm, in your attic. Seems like a good place. Or they're just trying to get from point A to point B and somebody put a freeway in their way. So they're hardly lawbreakers, though they break our laws. Does that make any sense?
That makes some sense. Yeah. So what is it about you and animals? I mean, where's the fascination? You just like the natural world, or you like animals? You like studying what they do that's kind of kooky?
I think everybody likes animals, don't they? Do you know anybody who doesn't like animals? That would be an interesting book.
Maybe that's your next one. I don't know.
No, I write books. It's what I do, and I have written a lot of books that have had to do with the human body or the human body in strange circumstances. And I wanted to take a bit of a break from the body. I've used up a lot of that terrain. There's only so much body there for me to play with. So just thought I would head off in a different direction. And human-wildlife conflict is a branch of science I had never heard of. I mean, there are symposiums and textbooks and people who make this their whole profession. And anytime I come across a field of science that I'd never heard of, I get kind of excited. And I think, well, what's in there? What do people do? And plus, animals, animals, they're hilarious. They're vexing. They're interesting. So there you go, and that's where that's kind of how I ended up writing this book. I'm not an animal freak. I like animals, but it wasn't a particular passion for animals that led me to the book any more than it was a passion for dead bodies that led me to Stiff. That'd be kind of weird.
This is a safe space. You can admit anything you want here. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. I've got some in the cellar right now. One of them's pretty ripe.
So I'm looking at the chapters here, and they're sort of funny chapter names, but not everything that happens is funny. I mean, mall cops, mall is MAUL, crime scene forensics when the killer isn't human, breaking and entering and eating, how do you handle a hungry bear, the elephant in the room, manslaughter by the pound. So they're sort of cute, charming chapter titles, but what was this all about? Okay, you like animals not any more than the next guy down the block, but you wanted to see what? You sort of get into their world in a odd way.
Well, it's a look at how do we avoid these conflicts or prevent these conflicts that we have when animals step into our business. Because once they're there and once they're pissing people off, it doesn't typically end well. So, it's a look at some of the ways that science has helped out with that, and also just, different cultures. How do they handle it? It's just an exploration of a world I knew nothing about, which is what all my books ultimately are.
So let's talk about elephants. What did you learn about elephants that you didn't know?
I didn't know anything about elephants, and I still don't know that much about elephants. But what I do know about is the trouble that they get into in regions of India where they exist in fairly large numbers. 500 people a year are killed by elephants in India. I mean, India is a very populous nation, but nonetheless that's a lot of people. Compare that to here, where every year bears kill between 1 and 3 people. 500, that's a lot of people being killed by an animal that, honestly, when I was growing up, my reference points were Babar, the elephant, the gentle elephant wearing spats, and Dumbo and National Geographic, which, they were portrayed as kind of gentle, wise animals. So I headed off to India, where there's a researcher from the Wildlife Institute of India who goes around to villages in the north of India where these animals, it's on the elephant corridor, where they migrate through on an annual basis, and have tended to kind of get stuck in the recent years because of encroachment of humans. So when they're stuck in a region and they start running out of food, they tend to go into farmers' fields, which pisses off the farmers, understandably. These are subsistence farmers, so they'll run out into the field at night when there's like 6, 8 elephants in the field, and the elephants disperse and panic, and the people are sometimes drunk and often panicked. And, as my mother liked to say, somebody's going to get hurt. So what this researcher does is train people. There are elephant response teams who are called in to, first of all, to try to head off elephants. And if they do enter an agricultural plot, they know how to steer them away without causing panic in a way that avoids the kind of closeness that often leads to somebody getting hurt or killed.
This researcher you keep referencing is named, sorry for the pronunciation, Dipanjanaha, and
yes.
Not bad, right?
Spot on.
Spot on. As you write, he locks up his office, slaps a Government of India on-duty placard on a hired four-wheel drive, and heads out on a sort of awareness camp road trip. This year, his cousin Aritra is coming along as his assistant, and I'm, meaning Mary Roach, is in the car too. We're starting in North Bengal, confusingly a region of West Bengal, where each year wild elephants kill on average 47 people and injure another 164. 47 people per year in an area the size of Connecticut. Outside the car window...
See?
Yeah, well, exactly. And then you sort of paint this picture of plantations that grow tea, marigold farms, rice plants. I like that, set in the earth like toothbrush bristles. It all sounds very, very pretty. And then elephants. What happens?
Like I said, they're moving through the land, and they tend to go across the top of India. And they are looking for food, particularly if they get isolated in a pocket of land. And so somebody growing crops, I mean, the elephant doesn't know this is somebody's property, somebody's food. So elephants, and even if they're not eating anything, 6 elephants walking across your farmland, it does a tremendous amount of damage. So, and if there isn't somebody on hand, an elephant response team, as I mentioned, if there isn't that, then people tend to run out and do stupid things, and sometimes someone gets fatally injured. So that's what can happen.
When you set out to write this book, what did you have in mind? Obviously, all this travel was done prior to the pandemic. So what did you have in mind in terms of the animals you wanted to study, in terms of the places you wanted to go? Was it place or animal that drove, how you were sifting through? I mean, God knows there's a lot of different animals that cause all sorts of problems. I mean, did you just throw the dart?
No, for me, it's not so much the animal or the place, but what's going on. What's going to be something I can, a scene I can step into, something I can see, observe, something I can describe for people. So it's not just a report from afar. I want there to be color and description and dialogue and surprise and action. When I start a book, I'm doing a lot of emailing people all over the world going, hey, working on this book, just sort of getting going. What are you going to be doing in the next couple of years, and can I tag along? That is, if it sounds relatively, I mean, that's actually 2 emails. What are you going to be doing? And then if there's something, A, that seems interesting, and B, that the researcher wouldn't mind me pestering them for a day or a week, then that tends to make the cut. So, yeah, you're right. There's thousands of animals, species that I don't know if I'd say thousands, probably, that irritate people and get up in their worlds. So there were a lot of possibilities, but finding something that's going to be going on, because I like to, I typically cover scientists and what they do. So hopefully trying to find something positive, something that might be a better solution to some of these conflicts. And there's some things I wanted a mix of things that Americans are familiar with, but also I was curious about India because culturally they're a little bit different in their attitudes towards some of these animals. So that kind of sums up how I make these decisions. It is an ever-changing. I mean, I may be 8 months into a book and discover something I hadn't heard about and decide to include that and bump something else. It's kind of a evolving organism.
Talk about something close to home. Okay, we touched on elephants. What that this audience, say an American audience, or say where you are up in the Bay Area in California, what's relatable? What is something that you were surprised about, that you learned about, that you discovered, that isn't an elephant or a tiger, but maybe something we have in our backyard?
Well, sure. Depending on how you define backyard, we deal with bears here in California, black bears. But just in my own backyard, I've got, and this is an urban area, I've got raccoons, possums, squirrels. I've seen a fox down on Park Boulevard, skunks, roof rats. So I think there's a tremendous number of species you can find literally in your own backyard. So some of those I talk about. Cougars also, we've got those not far from here. So I think those are more relatable for people, and so those are in the book too, in different elements of the work being done with those animals.
But why is it fun for you to cover science? Talk about how you got into science was it as a kid or later in life?
Yeah, I didn't take any science in college really. I took astronomy because it was a gut, it was an easy class.
Same here.
Yeah, and I can tell you, here's the sum total of what I remember. The moons of, what is it, Jupiter? Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto. There, that's all.
That's pretty good.
That is my sum total of my science education.
Well, that's farther than I got. I was in music school as a cellist trying to fulfill a science requirement, and boy, was that class hard. That was really hard.
Yeah. Fortunately, Wesleyan didn't have any requirements, so I escaped that. But I think it's kind of tragic because when in high school I did have one really great teacher, and he was the physics teacher, and I learned a lot and I retained a lot. He was funny. He made things relatable and approachable. And
is this at Hanover High School? Or?
Yeah, exactly.
We went to the same high school. The same high school.
Was Mr. Dumont teaching?
No.
Shoot. He was good. That man was good. So when I worked on Packing for Mars, which had to do with astronauts and all the weird challenges of putting bodies up in space where they humans up in space where they didn't evolve. I wish that I'd had a teacher, a biology teacher like him, or a chemistry teacher like him, because science is actually incredibly interesting. I mean, the science is the whole world around you. It's your body, it's everything you eat, your computer. I mean, it can't be boring because it is the world. But I just didn't have a good, I didn't have the kind of exposure to it in high school that, with the exception of my beloved physics teacher.
I had such a bad understanding and bad appreciation, zero appreciation for maths and sciences until this podcast, and now I've had the opportunity to have on the best physicists in the world and the great mathematicians, and they explain it in a way. I always say,
Yeah.
God, I wish you were my 7th grade teacher. I wish you were my pre-algebra teacher.
Yeah, same.
Because, there's I can suddenly see, oh my God, this is amazing. It's not just interesting or practical or whatever. It goes beyond it. It's even moving the way some of them speak about it.
Yeah.
And I had good teachers. I didn't have bad teachers, but it didn't do it for me.
Same. Yeah. My teachers weren't bad, but, and it's partly my fault because at Hanover High School, at that time, you could take the honors science or the easy science, and I opted for the easy science. And people who took Mr. Hutchins' class, which was the honors science, loved it, loved him, went on to medical school. They were also in chemistry too. There was Bruce Kolasik. Did you have him? Anyway, I don't know, maybe he's retired. Again, I didn't. I took the easy class, and it just, there wasn't the same passion being projected by the teachers that I had, and I regret that. I wish I'd taken the honors class.
Yeah.
I say that now. Maybe it would have been really, really hard, and I would have hated it.
Well, I don't know what. I think I took the normal one, but I wasn't there. Learn from my mistakes, as I guess everybody should, hopefully. So here we are. Here's you wanting to write about science. Went to Wesleyan, right down the river from here, 2 states away. And what, you woke up one day saying, I want to be a science writer? What does that happen?
No. I graduated with a liberal arts degree in the middle of a recession, and what could I do? I applied for some jobs, didn't get them. I ended up being a freelance copy editor, proofreader, copy editor. It's not a career I'm well suited for. You have to be very detail-minded, and you have to really care that something was capitalized differently in chapter 2 versus chapter 8. And I'm the kind of person who's like, yeah, who cares? Nobody's going to notice. It's just, you can't have that mindset as a copy editor. So I did it for a while. I didn't do it well. And then I thought, I'd rather write this shit than try to clean it up. Because a copy editor, for the types of publishers that I was working for, one of them was a military press, and there were a lot of memoirs of Vietnam and World War II. And it wasn't the cleanest writing, and I was having to kind of do a pretty intensive copy editing, and I was just, I'd rather just write it in the first place. So I thought, well, I don't know, maybe writing. So just started freelance writing, not science, just general magazine writing for the Sunday magazine of the local newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle. So just fun pieces for that magazine, and then wrote for some other publications, eventually national magazines. And I did that for about 15 years. Eventually, one of them that did contact me was Discover, which is a science magazine. Asked if I wanted to do any writing for them, and I said sure. And those were consistently, for me, the most interesting assignments and pieces to write and to report. So that kind of started my interest in reporting on science, because science happens all over the world. And also I was really interested, I wanted to travel. So I would look for science going on in Africa, in Antarctica, in Asia, just any way I could kind of wrangle a trip somewhere and get my expenses paid. That was what I was all about in my 20s and 30s. And then the books, the heyday of magazine feature writing kind of went away. But there weren't budgets for travel. The per word rate went down. Internet magazines started showing up, and the budgets were small. So it seemed like a good time to move into books.
Did the internet ruin it for magazines in that respect?
Well, there were a lot of things going on. There was also Yeah, in a sense, I mean, because newspapers used to make the bulk of, I mean, the San Francisco Chronicle made a lot of its money from classified advertising, and Craigslist came in, and that very quickly supplanted, if that's the right verb, the classified ads. So the income that they could depend on began to dwindle as things like Craigslist and the being able to buy and sell things online began to become much more popular. And the same way that personals ads used to be in newspapers, and then they moved online, and then eventually uh, people began to take their news and information from websites, and they would get it for free for the most part. So subscriptions dropped off. I mean, all of that was going on around that time.
How do you write about science if you're not a scientist? I don't mean to be glib at all, but how do you understand and then distill in a way that's authoritative?
Well, I don't know if I ever am authoritative, but what you have to do is essentially find scientists who are willing to be your tutor for no compensation. So I have no shame in saying to someone, look, I don't have a background in this science or any science, so these are going to seem like really simplistic questions for you. And please be patient with me. I may ask you to explain things, to go over things, to say them in a way that is simpler. That is a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage in that I'm writing for a general audience, not a audience of scientists. So I'm kind of stepping in at the same place that my reader is. So I'm discovering it along with them. And so there's that same sense of discovery and wonder and amazement and horror, whatever it is. It's all new to me. So I think when you're a scientist, you're a researcher, and the things that you get excited about are really, you're really drilled down into the details. You're on a molecular level, or, checking genetics and gene expression. And that is not necessarily something that the general public is A, going to have the background to understand, or B, it's not as easy to capture people and get them involved in reading that book if they don't have a background in it. So it's an advantage in that way. It's a disadvantage in that I'm not an authority, and I feel like I'm always on thin ice. I may have line by line my facts right, but I don't understand the big picture because I didn't study this for 4 years or even 4 weeks or sometimes 4 minutes. So it's kind of a mixed blessing.
It seems to me that at the same time you talk about people maybe not being interested in the minutia or the exact genetic code from here to there, that basically what interests you would interest me, would interest the person in the next office over. That there's a basic, I think, curiosity.
Yes.
Take CRISPR, for example. Walter Isaacson was on here recently, and last book was about Jennifer Dowden and CRISPR, who's right across the bridge from you.
Yes.
Walter is not a scientist per se, but he's incredible at making that understandable and making us care. Why should I care about CRISPR? Why should I, a healthy 32-year-old, care? What's it going to do for me? But he can explain that. Once you get it, once you understand why, then sort of you're more willing to accept the specifics and sort of take it in as a big picture.
Yeah, I agree. I think of myself and what I do. I'm kind of a gateway drug to science. Like I think that a lot of people come to my books not thinking of themselves as people with an interest in science. So I'm kind of slipping it in, like, you just read a book that has science in it.
But you can be funny too, right? I mean, you have a sort of funny side in your writing, quirky side that makes people chuckle. People like that. People connect to it, yeah?
Yeah, that's kind of how I think that's how you get people to read about science who don't think they're interested in science. You entertain them, you make them care, you fascinate them. You have to kind of figure out a way, like you said, like Walter Isaacson, to make people care, to make them understand enough to care, or to, in my case, maybe entertain them or make them laugh. So some way to make it not feel like a grind, because people people go through high school thinking, oh, science is a grind. There's exams, there's molecules, there's stuff that I have to memorize. And so science gets this reputation as a drag, a grind, something that's difficult, something about, why should I care? It's irrelevant. Math in particular, people think, how does that matter to me? So the goal is to get people past that so that they'll care about these things and ultimately care about the world around them.
Speaking of caring and getting people in the door, a lot of what I talk about, obviously because I'm a cellist, is people and classical music, or people in music in general. But how do we get people in the door? Without, you don't need to be an expert. I always say you don't need expertise, you don't need a background, you don't need a formal training. You just need curiosity or the willingness to be put in a concert hall in the chair. I tell people, then I think you'll really like it once you get in. Obviously, music is probably a lot more approachable than science is, I would imagine. But, what does music do for you? Music plays a role in everybody's life, Mary Roach. What's it to you?
Actually, music is, it's kind of essential for me when I'm really in the throes of the bulk of the writing of a book. I go to a local cafe. There's 2 cafes where I like the mix of what they play, and it makes me more productive. Something, it has to be the right mix, and I don't even know the names of what's being played, but it makes me focus better. I don't know, it does something to my mindset. It's counterintuitive. You would think having music playing, and often it's music with lyrics. It doesn't have to be, I don't know if there's a word for non-lyric music, but it doesn't have to be that. So that...
Instrumental music.
Yeah, instrumental, sure, yeah. Why didn't I think of that word? Thank you. That's what I need you for. Those technical terms like instrumental.
It's very
but
technical,
anyway, yeah. So just makes it happen. I get so much more writing.
So you
done.
Go to a cafe and you do all your writing at a cafe?
Not all of it, but a lot of it.
A lot of it.
And I'm far more productive there than I am in this quiet space, this quiet echoey space that is my office downtown.
In Oakland. So you pack up your laptop and you sit down with a cup of coffee at a cafe.
Yep.
and you write.
That's what I do.
After all these years writing, you've been writing since you graduated from college. Why do you like writing so much? What is it about it that sticks with you? Is it the changing of the subject matter? Is it the act of writing? Is it the act of expressing, of querying on paper? Or is it the fact that you feel there's so many things that you want to learn about and then transmit that, or both?
Yeah, the last thing. There's so many things I want to learn about. I enjoy just stepping into somebody's world, a world that is utterly foreign to me, and absorbing that, and then bringing home this. Just it's kind of like bringing home this pile of sticks, and then building the best, most interesting thing I can with that pile of sticks. I enjoy that challenge. Writing I both love it and hate it. When I have to start a chapter, it's always a day of just kind of mental grinding. And how do I start this? How do I frame it? What's going to be the best way into it? Where does that lead? But once I get past that and I get into it, it's incredibly fun and satisfying, and hours go by. It's kind of a mysterious thing. I think it's just satisfying. And books in particular, because with a book, unlike a magazine piece, you're not fitting into the framework of the magazine's demographic or tone, style, constraints on length. You are the product. So this publisher has trusted you to go out and do whatever you think is the best thing to do with this book, and they set you loose. And for a couple of years, that's what you do. It's both terrifying and fun and satisfying because in the case of my editor, she doesn't see it till I'm done. So I have this incredible freedom to go down whatever rabbit hole I want to go down. And I love going down rabbit holes. I'm happiest in a rabbit hole. So it's the combination of the research and writing. Because if the research didn't go well, if I didn't find an interesting scene or an interesting person to spend my time with or in, the writing will be a drag. It won't go well. It won't end up well. So the two are just so meshed that it's hard to separate them. That is the reporting and the research and the writing. That was three things: the reporting / research and the writing.
Does it ever happen when you show up to a place and you're bright-eyed and ready to go, you have your notepad and a nice pen full of ink and you're ready to take notes, and maybe your iPhone camera's all geared up, and you just say to yourself after the first hour, this kind of sucks. It wasn't what I was expecting. I don't like this guy. I don't like the place.
Yes. Yes, it does. I have.
And what do you do? To get on a plane and leave?
I have done that. One time I was supposed to write about this particular kind of storm, and those planes that fly into a hurricane, the hurricane hunters, I think they're called. I'd always wanted to fly on one of those planes, but it's tough because you got to get yourself to the point where they're leaving from, and a hurricane is moving all the time, and you can never plan ahead. But anyway, this guy was doing this research on this kind of storm, and that sounded exciting. So it was happening near where I live. It was in Monterey. So I went down to Monterey and got on the plane. First of all, the storm didn't happen. It's just me on a plane with some instrumentation. Secondly, the meteorologist was one of those rare scientists who could not, for the life of him, make this science accessible to me. He had this body of knowledge that was very, very specific. I don't know even what a high pressure front is. I don't know anything other than, partly cloudy and highs in the 70s. That's the extent of my meteorological knowledge. So he was frustrated and annoyed with me, and it went nowhere. So we got back down, and I called my editor and I said, well, just forget it. Just forget it. No story. That kind of thing. Yeah, that happens. It's rare. It really is rare. And that's why you have some communication with somebody before you go and step into their world. Do you have a little? I mean, not. I don't know what these people look like or what their lab looks like. But I've emailed with them. They kind of get what I'm after, and I'm very clear with the person I'm hoping to interview. I'm clear in that I need a scene. I need something happening. What will this look like? What will it be like? So I'm trying to get a little bit of a preview in my head because I'm too optimistic. I tend to get, wow, this would be so cool. Like I once did a story for Discover. It was about the ergonomics of airplane seats. So I'm like, that'd be so cool. It's this lab full of seats where people like just sit in airplane seats. Okay, that's not very interesting. But for some reason I was like, that's really weird and cool. And I got there and it's a lot of people sitting in a chair for 3 or 4 hours. And I was a subject, and I was like, this is a little bit silly, but I did write the piece. I tried to get across the inherent silliness and surrealness of this endeavor, but it's like a part of me was going, well, what did you think? It's a study on airplane seats. So yeah, sometimes my expectations are a little off.
What I think about is the intersection of arts and sciences and the humanities, and I like how it all works together. In fact, I guess that you do that sort of by definition, by being a non-scientist who writes about science. You're sort of bridging those two worlds, right? Why do you think that's important? Why is it important that they coexist and not be separated? I'm a big proponent of people who can meld and mix the two.
Oh, me too. I think it's important, especially in an era in which science is something people don't trust or don't believe. It's important to get out of the echo chamber. If you're a scientist and you only communicate what you're doing to your peers, you do a disservice to science. And because to have somebody who's willing to speak with enthusiasm to an outsider like myself, and then for me in turn to take that to readers, I think that's how you build interest and trust in science itself. And I think that's just so important in this era of science denial and climate change and all the other crap going on in our world. I think I agree, very important.
There's a huge fire. Well, actually, there's a few right up the road from you. Do you think about that a lot? Do you ever want to write about wildfires? How they're changing? How are they changing your part of California? I've spoken to people who've lived in the Bay Area for decades, and they said up till very recently, we didn't see smoke here on a regular basis. We didn't really think about wildfire season, and suddenly here it is, expanding year by year.
True, yeah. It's in the past 3 years, it's become something that happens. There's actually two fire seasons, and they are reliably causing multiple days where the air is not safe for you to go outside. That never used to be the case. And everybody I know has an air purifier in their home and a little device that measures the AQI. We all know what an AQI is. We didn't know that before.
Yeah.
We now know.
Air quality index for those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we've become conversant in this language of disaster, and it's I all over the Bay Area, even though the fires are not right here. People talk about, is it time to leave this state? 2 years in a row, my husband and I have canceled backpacking trips because there's either been a fire nearby or the smoke is bad enough that it made no sense to go. So one of the things people love about California is the Sierras and the opportunities to go backpacking and to be in deep wilderness. And now it's beginning to feel like that isn't an option, or you're always kind of risking bad air. There's the times when it's good to go backpacking, spring and fall when you have like clear skies and sun, and I mean those are, and school is back in session, so the trails aren't quite as crowded. That's fire season, so it's a huge deal here now.
What do you think about it? Are you considering changing something about how you live? Are you deeply pessimistic? Are you does it weigh on you? Does it weigh on someone who lives with science? Do you think about it?
Yeah. No, I think about it. I think about it a great deal, particularly during fire season, which is earlier every year. I think about, should we not have this tree by our house because it's a fire risk? Should we cancel that trip because it's likely to be smoky? What ways can we get ready for when they start rationing water? Should we plant different plants in the yard? We've already done that. People don't have lawns anymore. We've already had water rationing, and I'm sure it's going to start soon. So it's a part of everyday life in California. And I mean, we're not to the point where we're moving yet, but we do think that we're stupid not to.
Yeah.
So I'm a little, I don't know if I'm pessimistic or realistic.
Where would you move? I just out of curiosity, where would you move?
That's the question. I don't know. I mean, I got my Irish citizenship about a year ago, and that's
Really?
a fantasy.
How'd that happen?
Through my grandmother. She was born in Ireland, and Ireland is very generous with handing out citizenship.
Well, so is New Hampshire. Maybe you should return to New Hampshire, the place of your birth.
Perhaps I should. My brother talks about wanting to move back to Hanover.
I hear from people all the time that I'm not here, full time. I spend summers in the Upper Valley, and I come back for as many holidays and Thanksgiving in the Upper Valley in New Hampshire is like nowhere else. It's the absolute best place to have Thanksgiving and all that. But I run into people all the time who are desperate to move back to the Upper Valley of all different jobs, all different ages, but they've really felt a draw. I can see why.
No, I can too. And I come back there. I travel up with a friend of mine from Hanover. Sometimes she lives in Connecticut now, but just to get together, let's take a road trip up to Hanover. I was born in Etna, but we'll just for nostalgia's sake, and also because it's beautiful and it feels, it's something, it's embedded in me in some weird way. I drive along, even driving along, what is it, 91, Highway 91, the road
Yeah.
you take up to, the way the granite was cut into to make way for the road, the freeway, just the look of the granite and the trees, even when they're bare, that's just, it's so familiar to me and so kind of weirdly comforting. It just feels like home, even though California has been my home since I was 21 or 2. Yeah.
I love trees when they're bare. I do a lot of cycling, and I was just on a long ride around Vermont last week, and I was telling someone I can't wait till the trees are bare because I love being able to see through.
Yeah, you can see so many more birds, as you can see so much more. And also just, at twilight, the way a bare tree looks against that kind of, the blue of the sky at the gloaming. There's nothing like it with the moon shining through. I know. I have felt kind of caged
Yeah.
the past year and a half. I mean, I like where I live, and I love hanging out with my husband and my family, but I feel every now and then I just think I gotta get out of here. I want to go get on a plane and go somewhere far, far away where I want to be surprised again by the world.
Yeah. Do you want to be in a place that you don't know? Do you want to be in a place that overwhelms you with the foreignness?
I do. Oh, absolutely. All the time. Yes. The more foreign, the better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It hasn't been very foreign the past year and a half.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, have gotten to know their houses better than they ever thought. They've gotten to know the little corner of molding and the screws on the lock on the guest bathroom door, things that they really didn't think they'd ever be studying. They studied.
No, I know. I remember, even just last week, there was something that was magneted to the refrigerator that was gone. And I was like, oh, did you remove, it was one of the grandkids' drawings. And I was like, what happened to Gussie's little sun print there that she had? Oh, yeah, it got wet. I took it down. I was like, oh, okay. Just noticed it was gone. Like, just the tiniest little detail.
Aren't you tired of that?
I'm so tired of that.
Well, look.
Sick of it.
Until we meet in a foreign land, I'll have this book with me, which is entertaining and also interesting, an odd look at some of the behavior of some interesting creatures. Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law. Mary Roach, it's great to talk to you. I look forward to the next time.
Hey, me too. Thank you so much, Daniel.
You've been listening to Talking Beats with Daniel Elchuk. The original theme music is by Ronald Barkham. The content coordinator is Nathaniel Mosey, and Doug Christian is executive producer. We invite you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can support us at patreon.com/talkingbeats. That's patreon.com/talkingbeats. And be sure to check us out on social media. We'll see you next time on Talking Beats with Daniel Elchuk.